If you're watching The Context, it's time for our weekly regular segment, AI Decoded. Welcome to AI Decoded. Every week in this programme, we take you deep into the world of artificial intelligence. And what we've tried to do is focus these programmes on one particular theme. So last week, we looked at the advance of AI on the battlefield. Tonight, we're going to consider something a number of you have raised, and that is AI and energy, or more specifically, the energy that AI consumes. There are climate experts who are warning that the advance of artificial intelligence could lead to an 80% increase in our global carbon emissions.
Well, let's start with sustainability, because that cloud that AI models live on is actually made out of metal, plastic, and powered by vast amounts of energy. And each time you query an AI model, it comes with a cost to the planet.
That is Sasha Lane, lead climate researcher at the AI company Hugging Face. She's going to be joining us from Montreal in just a moment. How much energy are we using? Well, according to this report from Vox, AI is already consuming as much energy as a small country, and we are only at the beginning. The Next Web says this is where our two existential crises collide with one another: the climate crisis and the exponential growth of AI. Can one help solve the other, or will it exacerbate the problem? Here in the studio, our regular AI contributor, Priya Lakhani, CEO of the AI-powered education company Century Tech. Welcome.
Good to see you.
Right, look, when it comes to digital, everybody knows there is a cost. There's the wiring, there's the chips, there's the precious metals, there's the water that cools the data processing centres. What we often don't talk about is the energy that goes into producing AI, and specifically the training of AI language models like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Why?
Because they're far more hungry than what we've seen before. So you have these AI models that you and I have talked about, we've shown, we've played with, right? These AI models are trained and they're deployed in data centres. And the data centres consume vast amounts of electricity. So if you are powering the data centre with non-renewable sources, then essentially you have potentially huge carbon emissions. And those particular models that we're talking about, these generative AI models, not just language models, right, not just LLMs in terms of chat models, but also the multimodal models, images, videos, consume an enormous amount. So if you remember in about 2019, we used to say if you stream an hour of video, right, it was 36 grams of CO2. Just to put that into context for everyone, because that's why we're here, okay, that's driving a car, typical kind of petrol car, about 160 metres. Now, Meta, they just released Llama 3 on Hugging Face, one of my favourite platforms, okay? And that model, they said, emitted about 2,290 metric tonnes of CO2. And so you're going to say, put that into context. That's about 500 average cars and what they emit in an entire year. So you start to get what we had with digital, which is what you asked, all the way to these really huge AI models. And I just want to show you, Christian, what I looked at a little bit earlier before I came in. So I just looked at half an hour of the images produced on Midjourney. So this is Midjourney that you're seeing now. Okay, so you've got about 10 unique images that have been produced by this particular platform. And that was about half an hour, about 4:30 p.m. UK time today. Okay, just those images, and that's just on one channel of where you can find Midjourney. Okay, one. There are lots, hundreds and hundreds. But just those 10 alone would take about 2.5 times the battery charge of a phone. So this is a significant problem. And if anyone's interested, there are some great interviews actually with Mark Zuckerberg and others that say that there is going to be an energy bottleneck, right? And obviously for activists, this is a significant problem. So I'm really looking forward to having Sasha on to discuss this with us.
Well, let's bring her in. Sasha Lane. She is the lead climate researcher at Hugging Face, which Priya really likes. And she spent nearly a decade looking at data storage and machine learning and how this all contributes to our energy consumption. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Right, before we get started, maybe I could just frame our conversation with an image that you sent us, actually, that for me really underlines just how expensive our digital usage has become. So here is Google's annual energy use, 18.3 trillion watts. That's 10 or 15% of that is going towards AI. And here's what the Republic of Ireland uses in any one year, 29.3 trillion watts. So one company, Sasha, is now consuming about 2/3 of what a small country uses each year. And yet I don't hear governments talking about that problem.
I think it's because AI is really a horizontal. It's not like your typical vertical, like agriculture, transportation, and it actually affects all industries, anything that uses AI, anything from navigation to web search. And so I think governments don't really know what bucket to put it in. And when you don't know what bucket it goes in, you tend to kind of let it slip through the cracks.
And Sasha, can you describe this in terms of the scale of large language models? So what their usage is like, and actually tell us what therefore that means in terms of energy consumption and the impact on the environment?
Definitely. Language models have become one of the most popular usages of AI, and they're being deployed in everything. Nowadays, you can talk to your stove or your fridge. And in a recent study we did, we found that training a large language model is definitely very energy intensive, and that's the numbers that you gave. But actually, each query also uses energy. And depending on the size of the model, 200 to 500 million queries will equal the amount of energy used for training. So it might seem like a lot, but for ChatGPT, it averages around 10 million users a day. So within a couple of weeks, you have this vast amount of energy that is equivalent to all these cars over a year, but just by people using the tool.
Did you see this story this week that Microsoft are going to plow in about $100 billion into this supercomputer called Stargate, and it's going to be powered by not one, they say, not one, but several nuclear power stations. And that got me thinking, because I have heard Sam Altman at ChatGPT talk about this, about OpenAI. He's talked about this, and he says, yeah, that's how we're going to have to work. We're going to have to create our own energy systems. Is that perhaps where new energy comes from? The biggest companies in the world driving the investment?
Well, I mean, it is a problem, because to what extent do you want big tech companies to be building their own nuclear reactors? And maybe that energy can be better used for other things, right? Because we should be decarbonizing our energy globally. And currently, if we're going to funnel all that investment into the energy used for AI, maybe other sectors will get overlooked. And we should be focusing on those if we really want to decarbonize.
And Sasha, what I'm quite excited about is that when we talk about AI models, and I was on Hugging Face today, so for those who don't know what it is, it's an AI model repository, and playing with Llama 3. I like the fact that models now have a description potentially of how much energy they have used. You've produced something pretty novel at Hugging Face, haven't you? So when you're building these AI models, we're focused on the latency, the speed of the model, and how performant the model is. But you're potentially creating a little TripAdvisor of how efficient it is. So tell us about that.
Yeah, currently when people go on Hugging Face, they tend to shop around a little bit for models that work for the task that they want to do. It could be language, it could be audio, it could be image generation. Now we're even looking at video. And typically they'll look at things like performance or latency, but I'm calculating the energy usage across all different tasks and models on the hub, on the Hugging Face website. And I want to provide that information to people so that they can factor it in. So maybe this model is not only faster, but it's more efficient. Maybe this model is slightly less performant, but it's vastly more efficient. So I'm developing Energy Star ratings for AI models.
Well, listen, since we're talking about how we mitigate the problem, let me introduce you to Chris Starky, because he is the CEO of the London-based startup NextGen Cloud, and they've been in business since 2020, and they source data centers that are entirely powered by renewable energy. Welcome, Chris, to the program. Tell us what you do and how your clients would typically work.
Well, we're on the other side of the fence. Our business is all about building, large-scale GPU clusters. Basically, we've got a core focus on building high-density accelerated compute. Basically, this is typically what companies maybe that use Hugging Face, or companies that are using or building their own foundational models. This is the type of infrastructure that they would be consuming. And our mission effectively is to deliver this at scale, 100% renewably powered.
And Chris, how do we achieve this sort of optimization of models? Because there's all sorts of things that we could be looking at. So we're looking at infrastructure efficiency that I know you look at in terms of cooling technologies. I'd love to hear more about that. And then also the optimized hardware. So, for example, NVIDIA brought out the Blackwell platform, and what they say with Blackwell is that it reduced the costs and energy consumption by about 25x for tech companies. So can you describe these sorts of methodologies, how reliant we are on these? And when we talk about cooling methodologies, can you explain that to us?
What is that?
We know that data centers and we know that these racks need cooling, but it would be really great if you can walk the audience through the process.
How long have we got? I'm not too sure how long we've got, but
not long.
A short, high level. I mean, only a few years ago, we were building high performance environments that maybe 10 to 20 kilowatts was deemed as kind of high dense, and now quite commonly we're building out environments that are 50 to 60 kilowatts per rack. And the new iteration, the next generation of chips, and some of the infrastructure, that we're bringing into play for next year, 2025, we're going to be north of 120 kilowatts per rack. So, we're seeing a clear, increase, an exponential growth in density. And that's great. We can fit more power into data centers, but the data centers will eventually be drawing a huge amount of resource, a huge amount of energy. So it's just unsustainable to have traditional techniques of cooling, like air cooling, which is quite common now. So we've got a keen focus on trialing and testing new ways to cool the chips. One of the new ways is something called liquid cooled direct to chip. This brings a huge amount of efficiency, but at the same time, as chips get more powerful, we're obviously drawing a huge amount more power, per square feet, or if you like, or per square foot in each data center. So,
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, because we're really pressed for time, but I just want to get a really quick final answer from both of you. Maybe you can chip in on this. Pardon the pun. What about sovereignty? Because everybody wants control of their own computers, and obviously some of that's going to come down to where the cloud is, what energy they have, what energy they can generate. If we're going to make this available to everybody, how concerned are you both by that? Sasha, let me start with you first.
I feel that AI is really slipping through the cracks when it comes to accounting for energy and carbon, because it's often companies in one country using cloud compute in another country. And often, for example, every time I talk to cloud providers, they're like, we don't know what's running on our centers. It could be streaming, it could be AI. So it's really hard for them to account for this energy usage. So every time I'm like, okay, give me a number, they're like, we don't have any numbers. So I've seen that it's currently not being accounted for, let's say.
Yeah, Chris?
Yeah, if they're trying to do it sustainably, I think a lot of countries will struggle. They absolutely will. There's just not enough infrastructure, locally to provide sustainable infrastructure. Not at the scale, the demand that we're seeing currently. Every country is going to want a sovereign cloud. They're all absolutely going for it right now. Everyone wants their own sovereign GPT, for example. They're not going to be able to do it currently. Certainly not here in the UK, I do not think.
No, Priya was just saying everybody wants a supercomputer.
Everyone wants their supercomputer.
Well, I also as well. I mean, I'm just thinking back to G20. When to the climate conferences, and when people talk about carbon footprints and what belongs to that carbon footprint, we talk about emissions, but we never talk about cloud power or generating, computer generating.
It's the length of time it will take for supply to create these renewable energy, data centers at 100% to the demand. Yeah. Think about how quick it was that ChatGPT exploded. Right?
It's amazing. Sasha Lane, Chris Starky, amazing stuff. Thank you for being with us here on AI Decoded. Come back soon. After the break, Priya will guide us through some of the big stories of the week. Anyone seen the ad for the new Apple iPad? Not everyone's cup of tea. And I'll show you a biopic on President Putin made entirely by AI. And how long before we can speak to the animals? We'll be right back. You're watching AI Decoded. Now, the new ad for the AI-powered iPad has sparked quite the backlash among Hollywood creatives. Why? We will find out, because it's probably something to do with this. The fact that you can create an entire movie now without auditioning someone who looks like the Russian president. This is the AI-generated President Putin, a biopic The Guardian says will be out for release in September. If you can reproduce Vladimir Putin, then it stands to reason you can recreate anyone. There's a story here from The Times that reports there's been a surge in dead bots or grief bots, families using AI to bring their loved ones back to life. But does it require tighter regulation? And how long before we can understand what the animals are saying? Scientists have spoken to Sky News, and they say they think AI will one day help them communicate with a sperm whale. Dr. Dolittle, I presume. Let's start with this huge sensitivity, Priya, that there is within the creative arts industry. About what AI is doing, replacing talent, destroying the human experience of playing an instrument or writing a song. And so with that in mind, let me just play you the new ad from Apple, and we'll talk about it off the back.
Sometimes when I'm down and all alone, all I ever need is you. Winners come and they go, and we watch the melting snow.
Yeah, it's called Crush. Imagine all the things that it'll be used to create. Apple CEO Tim Cook said, let me just, that it'll obviously revolutionise the arts industry. But let me just read you this from Asif Kapadia, who is a writer and director. She said, I don't know why anyone thought this ad was a good idea. It's the most honest metaphor, she says, for what tech companies do to the arts, to musicians, creators, writers, filmmakers, squeeze them, use them, not pay well, take everything. And that's the point, right? We've talked about this on the programme before. Yeah. A bit insensitive, isn't it?
It's insensitive. I think obviously there's a lot of anger because of two reasons. There's the threat that AI poses, but then also it's just this idea that tech really misunderstands the art and the fact that, you know, what's technology's role going to be in diminishing artistic and cultural mediums, right? But what's really interesting, and I think there's a really funny video I do want to play, and just it would take literally 30 seconds on actually what one director created in response to Apple's adverts, and I don't know if we can get that up right now, but it was a filmmaker who reversed it and essentially described that, you know, it was a very, very good quality video, and it was essentially all of the arts, all the instruments crushing the iPad, and it was the reverse of that. But you know, why do I not think that this is an actual threat, okay? Because instruments are not just tools, right? Your guitar, your piano, that's a tactile, it's an immersive experience. I've got a Nikon DSLR. It enables me to have that sort of artistic creativity when I'm taking a picture, right? Which, you know, an iPad, as great as it is, and I love my iPad, but it's not able to do. And then when it comes to painting and drawing, for example, you've got these artists that use, you know, different physical mediums like oils and acrylics. It's not just all about that digital photo. But it was incredibly insensitive, I think, and Apple
But if people are wondering
that.
what the movies of the future might look like and what it might do to the cinematic arts in particular, maybe you should have a quick look at this. This is the new AI biopic. It'll give you an idea, entirely created by artificial intelligence.
The president has found time for you after all.
This will culminate nuclear strike.
Only I can save you and your family from prison.
Vladimir Putin has won with 53.44% of the votes.
It's an embarrassing result. What would have been the satisfactory result for you, Mr. President? 100.
I mean, the interesting thing about that, and this is what panics people in Hollywood, is that you don't need auditions for people that look like Putin. You can create Putin. They've got a Bill Clinton in there. It's Bill Clinton. I mean, then there might be an issue over that. I mean,
absolutely, in terms of obviously your image rights, right? And I think that's obviously, we've talked about the legal issues before, but I mean, you can do this at low cost with this sort of technology now, right? You don't have to deal with the egos necessarily, right, that you might otherwise have to. But there are huge ethical concerns with this, not just because it's easy to talk about that being Putin. I think a lot of the world would say, oh, that's fine. But actually, you're starting to potentially blur the lines between reality and fiction. You can misrepresent in many ways. I mean, you do question why they didn't just have an actor in the biopic. This is clearly just about using that technology. But I know there's so much more to come in the future when we talk about deepfakes and whether they're a good use or a bad use. But, you know, clearly, if that was of Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer, then it would be, people would be up in arms about it.
Yeah, it takes on a much greater effect, doesn't it, when it looks specifically like them.
Exactly.
Look, the best story of the week is this story about sperm whales.
Yeah.
We've known for some time, of course, that their calls and their clicks are highly sophisticated to coordinate and communicate with one another. But what if there is actually a language? Yeah. And these scientists that have been studying the whales in the Eastern Caribbean found that they use Morse code with a rhythm or a sort of tempo that suggests that there is some sort of meaning behind it. And that's where potentially AI comes in.
Yeah. How? Okay. All right. Okay. So when you're looking at language, okay, we map language. We map the words. Like imagine creating a map of all the words, okay, and where they are on this map. And then you calculate essentially the statistical difference between words, okay? And this is how you end up with these large language models. And you look at similarities between words, okay? And so here, what they're looking at is when they've got these clicks, they're looking simplistically for patterns between those clicks, and then they're actually recording what the whales are doing and then finding how those patterns might relate to diving really deep, right, or coming up or feeding, and then they're attaching essentially those patterns and creating this map and this language. And then there will be an exercise where they'll try and essentially overlay that with the English language. The test is, right, when they hear these clicks, okay, they're really loud, by the way, so if you watch videos on these whales, they're super loud, right? But when they hear those clicks, can the AI model that they then create predict what the whale is going to do? And then that's how you constantly then test.
And if that works, then you can extend that a bit further, and you can then start to create the language and talk back to it.
Exactly. What people want to do is potentially talk to their pets. This does raise huge ethical issues in terms of how we are interacting with animals and whether we should. Yeah. Should you?
No, I don't want to be asked for a biscuit every 5 minutes. Absolutely not. But I've talked to the whales.
I don't want my dog to tell me that it prefers my husband to me. That's what I don't. I
to live in
that's
ignorant
the
bliss.
worst one. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But the thing is, so obviously, I think there's a lot we can learn as well. But there's going to be huge questions about this. But lots of people working on bats, whales, elephants, and the FT has done a fantastic podcast on it, and I suggest you listen to it.
Oh, go and have a listen to that.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Congratulations to Sky News, who actually picked that up with the scientists. It's a really good one, though. That's it from us. We're out of time. We'll do this again same time next week. Just before we go, let me remind you that all the programmes that we do are on the BBC's YouTube channel. All the big interviews, lots of good people coming on this programme now. So if you want to look back at previous episodes, go and have a look at that.